now we're going to be talking about a realm of techniques that some people don't like. It's leg locks, but the ankle lock is legal at white belt, and so if you're looking at competing, you better know how to do it so you at least understand it, and then in the next video we're going to be talking about defense. So you don't have to go for this thing if you don't want to. However, leg locks are completely changing over the last few years. They're becoming very safe to go for, very thorough with their braking mechanics, and I mean even the ankle lock we're seeing at the highest level.
Yeah, so this used to be something that was like, it was almost a meme that people don't tap to straight ankle locks because, at least at black belt, right? Like you couldn't really find any examples of people at the high black belt level, world championship level ever tap into these. And in the last couple of years now, it's like all over the place. People are winning world championships at the black belt level with straight ankle locks.
Yeah.
So a lot has changed, and
there's different ways of doing the ankle lock, but we're just going to be showing you guys the basic ankle lock from standard Ashi, so you get kind of basic knowledge of this.
Basic knowledge of the leg entanglement, the first leg entanglement you should learn.
Yeah, so standard Ashi, standard Ashi, as some people get upset when I just call it Ashi.
Ashi is apparently the Canadian pronunciation, and Ashi is the American pronunciation of a Japanese word mixed with an English word. Yeah, this makes a whole lot of sense, this nomenclature.
Yeah, so you might also recognize this as like single leg X once we have knocked somebody down. What we are looking at doing is pinning the hip, controlling the knee with a wedge, and then we eventually have to start getting access to the end of the lever here so that we can maximize any kind of force that we're trying to generate into the ankle, or when we're looking at heel hooks and stuff eventually to be able to put rotation into the knee.
And this is important to remember, to note, because we're going to be talking about that in the defense video, which is those three ingredients: the pinning of the hip, or the immobilization of the hip, the wedging of the knee, and accessing the end of a lever. Those are the three ingredients that you need to succeed with any leg lock. So whether we're talking about a straight ankle lock or heel hooks down the road, different leg entanglements, they're all going to have the same goal. We may go about it in different ways, where in some versions we start out with the control and then attack the foot. In other versions we will get some sort of exposure of the heel or grip on the ankle and then move into the entanglement. But in any case, to succeed against somebody good, we need to meet those three conditions. So if you're training, and for example, you see this all the time with white belts, this foot will be here, and the poor white belt won't know what to do, and this person will be cranking, and the poor white belt will tap because they're not sure. This would never work on anyone good. Make sure that you meet those three conditions before you think that you're being successful.
So when we're blocking the hip here to control it, we're going to be bringing our heel up and over top on the thigh here, and to the best of your ability, rotating your toes down towards the floor here. What I'm wanting to do is being able to actually use the floor as base with the bottom of my toes here, so that if Rob was to push straight down on my foot, he's pushing it into the ground. If I do this, there's ability for it to move a little bit. Now, depending on the strength of you relative to your opponent, you might be able to still just hold the shit out of this. But if you're able to rotate, even if it's just a little bit, so if he pushes it down, it eventually hits the ground without clearing the hip, all the better. To add control, I'm coming up to the hip and I'm going to bring my shin as much as I can over top of my ankle here, because I'm going to be hiding that end of the lever, making it difficult for Rob to actually push down at that. My foot is hooking over to the opposite side of his butt cheek here, so right here we're controlling the right side of his hip. My foot is moving over to the left side of his hip. That allows me to be able to internally rotate my hip a little bit here and close my knee, versus if my foot, the more it moves to his center line here, the more my knee wants to open up like this, and that's weak control. Now, if you're really good at pinning the hip here, that knee is almost always going to just end up getting controlled anyway, but there is a curling of my leg here, and as I close my knee here, I'm going to do a slight scraping up his thigh. Not a lot, because if I start exposing the end of the lever here, he can clear the hip, but just a little bit here, so I'm creating a 45-degree kind of pull into his leg here. And this is that test that Rob and I talk about anytime we're teaching these leg locks, is you should be able to, without your arms, be able to form a tight wedge, wedges around the hip and the knee here. So now as Rob tries to pull his leg straight back, it's going to be quite a lot of work for him to get out. Obviously he will be able to if he just sits there and he keeps pushing and breaking away at it, but it should not be like this, where if Rob pulls, because that's not going to be leading to tight control of the position or tight braking mechanics of the ankle lock.
And obviously we're wearing gis, so there's quite a bit of additional friction. if you were to do this stuff in no-gi, this wedging mechanic becomes that much more important. So it's something to start working on as early as possible.
Yeah, so once we really immobilize the hip and the knee, we can actually start attacking the ankle lock effectively. What I'm looking at doing is getting an overhook grip on the leg, and I need to create a fulcrum, a pivot point, actually down at the ankle joint itself. So when Rob points his toes here, there's going to be this wrinkling down here at the Achilles tendon. That's where we want to be so that we're actually on the joint. What a lot of people do is they end up cranking into the calf, into the tibia and fibula, where it's just, I mean, it can generate a lot of force and make people tap, but we're not actually effectively and efficiently attacking the joint. We want to be able to devastate the joint itself. So I think it was Stephen Kessing's video a long time ago. He talked about the idea of sliding down a rope with a knot at the end of it. So I should be able to, with this overhook grip, and I'll just keep my legs open for right now for the demonstration purposes, and slide. I'm going to feel my forearm catch just right there at the heel. I want to be, I mean, depending on how bony you are, I have a lot of good forearm space here where we want to maximize the surface area here with the sharp part of the radial bone of our forearm so that we're not just using like the meaty part of our forearm where it's like creates a nice pillow, like I'm wrapping a cloud around his ankle. I want the blade of my forearm, like a rule of thumb, just like we would with a guillotine, able to have a small surface area that's sharp and hard right underneath that ankle there. And what that's also going to do is give me the ability to take my elbow back so we're able to add a rotation-based element to close eventually when we're attacking that ankle lock. I want to get my hand up onto my chest as much as possible so I have a strong grip around the ankle. Another mistake that people make, and they do this a lot with other kinds of submissions too, is as they start to try and lean back, the forearm just ends up getting dragged down their belly towards their belt. And you can see how I'm just wasting a bunch of energy and distance here because I'm not actually putting any force into his ankle. This needs to be super tight. This is where you see some guys in the gi gripping up on the gi. Because if I got that grip now, I could finish this thing one-handed, and you're going to see that my hand would not actually move down, so all the force generates into the ankle. You could grab the gi if you wanted to, but here I'm just going to make like the what's the saucer and cup grip, kind of like guillotine grip. I'm taking my hand over top, closing over top of my fist like this, similar to like a high elbow guillotine. Not going full high elbow here, but what I want is I want to be able to punch my hand into my chest and punch it upwards, making sure that I don't lose that this tightness that I've created. Instead of just leaning back with this thing now, I want to take my elbow and start walking it back to start creating some inversion of the ankle, where I'm going to be able to start placing my head down to the ground here and onto my shoulder. So that now, only from here can I start to, with this wedge, push him away a little bit, to try and take slack out of the joint like a torture device where I'm pulling him apart and pulling up into the ankle. There's a lot of mechanics to this thing.
Yeah, we're kind of alluding to a couple of, we like to do things in threes because they're easier to remember, and I think we got it from The Simpsons as well. The idea is that we want to create extension, and we want to create rotation, and we want to create compression. There are three different kinds of joint locks that incorporate like those elements individually, at least how they're commonly taught. What we want to try to do is use all three of those elements throughout every submission that we're doing. So when we're talking about joint locks, the compression we're talking about is usually like the wedging stuff. The extension is what Rory was talking about, which is removing the slack. So my knee joint, my ankle joint, and my hip joint, they've got pliable structures, ligaments, capsules, things like that, that can act as shock absorbers. Before I try to apply pressure to a break, I want to remove all the elasticity from those areas. So by using that torture rack type methodology.
Yeah, I think about pulling the person apart at the knee. Can I actually separate their knee like that? It's not going to happen. But if I can do that, Rob's knee and the hip, won't be able to move, because if Rob's leg is limp like this, and I do this ankle lock extension,
see how much absorption there is with my knee and my ankle. Whereas if my knee doesn't move and my hip doesn't move and it's being stretched out, then all of that pressure is going into my ankle. We'll touch on this when we talk about arm bars later on, when we give you like a upper body kind of submission overview. But this is a really, really important concept to, again, understand early, because when we talk about over-engineering, when it comes to joint locks, at white belt and at blue belt, unless you're dealing with, you know, professional competitor type people tap to absolute garbage. They're just like, man, like people are so delusional about how effective their braking is, because in the gym, most of us have, well, I shouldn't include myself in the 9-to-5 job category, but most people doing jiu-jitsu have a 9-to-5 job they need to show up at the next day. So they will absolutely tap very, very early to stuff. And if you are not including this extension, rotation, compression element where you're maximizing the force production into one area as much as possible, you're not going to get anyone who's actually fighting you to tap, because you're not going to be able to put them at threat of catastrophic injury. You're not threatening to actually break their ankle if you're just lifting a little bit around the middle of the tibia. That's a really common thing, especially with leg locks, because people panic. There's a lot of mis and disinformation about leg locks out there. So you put a white belt in a straight ankle lock, a lot of time in class, they insta-tap, and then you go to do it in competition and they just look at you funny.
Yeah, there's going to be the two extremes where people will tap immediately all the time to it, or you're going to have people that do not respect it at all, like ourselves for the most part, where we're very comfortable defending it, but if it comes on strong, we will tap to it. But people will allow pops to happen, and unlike a lot of the other leg locks, some of the little popping that happens in the ankle and the foot isn't as devastating as when it gets to your knee.
Yeah, and so we need to, again, like, disclaimer. Rory and I eat ankle pops. Like, it's not a big deal.
At least 3 ankle pops.
Yeah, because we've got a ton of experience with this stuff, and we know that the worst thing that's going to happen is I'm going to have a little bit of soreness here when I push down on the gas pedal while I'm driving home. It's just not that big a deal the first couple of pops. Pops in the knee are usually really bad news. And depending on how much of a pop you're getting in the ankle, it could be, a mild
We're talking about
sprain.
Flexibility of the ankle. We're talking about us having long legs. So don't just take this as doctor's advice, like, a couple pops doesn't matter.
Like our ankle pops are different than some people's ankle pops, because we've just got some, capsulitis and it's it. So, if you're being a good training partner, when you hear an ankle pop in class, if somebody hasn't tapped, you should stop right away. Don't wait till there's 2 or 3 ankle pops. But the reason we say that this is, kind of safe is because the worst case scenario here is some, sort of mild damage to the ligaments here in the top of your foot, maybe, hairline fracture type stuff in these metatarsal bones. It's not nothing, but it's not going to put you out for 6 months. You might have a limp for a week or 2 kind of stuff. So you can sort of start to explore the limits as long as you trust your training partner with this ankle lock in a way that you shouldn't be exploring the limits with things like heel hooks, things like knee bars, stuff where damage to the knee is a much more serious thing. And depending on where in the world you train, you may not have health insurance.
So one other, or at least 2 other points. First is, if you're going for the ankle lock, treat it like a freebie that you can just check out, as long as you know to get up if it's not working.
This is maybe more important than any other.
If you're going for a leg lock, as you get more advanced in this stuff, we should always have control of the leg and the ability to deny our partner or opponent base and just be able to get up. And I'm surprised at how often I can blow somebody's mind with this, even at higher belt levels, where it's like, hey, you're going for this, it's not working, we're able to build up and just finish a sweep, or at least get back to top if we gave up top position to go for it. Don't just let go of the leg and scramble, or just let the person get on top. Keep that leg and perform a technical stand-up where I'm able to post on this elbow. I can keep this grip. This hand can be doing whatever I need to, or even grabbing both legs. I'm able to kick some of the weight off so I can withdraw this leg, build up onto my knee, and I can immediately start looking at ways to go into my passing. Another thing is, if we're talking about the idea of competing, there's a side that you're not allowed to attack because it's going to devastate the knee in an IBJJF setting.
Yes.
And so when you are attacking the ankle lock, there are different leg configurations you can use, but we are falling to the same side of the leg that we're attacking. So I'm attacking Rob's right leg, falling to his right hip. I can even move the belly down, but if we ended up turning, let's turn this way for the camera. If we turn like this, I'm no longer allowed to attack it, because apparently
in the IBJJF,
which
is a tournament company masquerading as a governing body. Please don't fall for that bullshit. They just run tournaments, and their rule set is quite dominant throughout the jiu-jitsu world. There are plenty of tournaments where this is not a thing, so don't assume that it is. If you go to a
read
Naga
the rules of the competition that you're entering.
Yeah, there are lots of really good tournament organizations that absolutely allow this. So this is not a fact of the jiu-jitsu world, it's an artifact of IBJJF, which is a shitty company that you shouldn't support if you can help it.
And so this is where it's important to understand the rules and know that either we have to just keep rotating so that we can attack it straight up, or like I just mentioned, being able to get comfortable at moving into finishing sweeps or getting back on top. So whatever your leg lock is, it shouldn't just be like that leg lock or bust mentality where you just squeeze the shit of it, burn your arms out, and then the person ends up getting on top and just decimating you. We should be able to control this. We should be able to control them as if it was a position like mount or back control. Check out submissions, problem solve stuff, and if it's not going our way, or if we choose to tie it into other things like guard passing or back attacks, we can exit at our own will and we can maintain control of our opponent the entire time.
Yeah, this whole leg lock thing can be a really beneficial addition to your game where you become very, just dangerous from a lot of places because you can also attack leg locks. Or it can be a really crappy rabbit hole where you become, as Rory alluded to, a leg lock or bust type of person who's looking for a shortcut to beating better people in jiu-jitsu. And that shortcut does work. You can get proficient at leg locks, again, depending on where you train and who you train with. If you can just be sort of barely okay at leg locks, and if you're in an area where everyone else doesn't know them, you're gonna feel like you're really damn good until you go up against somebody else who's actually decent at leg locks, and then you're gonna find out that you suck. The process of learning leg locks at some academies can be a very difficult one because, again, you learn a little bit about it and you'll just be tapping a lot, especially white belts and blue belts. So it's important that we give you that kind of warning about, don't fall in love with this at white belt and become the person who's only going for leg locks at all costs, because the ceiling on that is low, and it's getting lower by the day because those places where everyone just doesn't know leg locks, they're getting fewer and fewer. Way more people are understanding this stuff. The level of defense is higher than it's ever been. So if you have any interest in actually being good at jiu-jitsu, don't be that dude who's just going for leg locks.
So this wasn't supposed to be a video just going into a deep dive of ankle locks. So if you feel like you kind of just have a loose understanding of everything, but you're not a master of it, which you obviously aren't, that's fine. It was just to kind of break the ice and introduce you to what the ankle lock looks like and what the break mechanics are and some ideas about it, because now in the next video we're going to be talking about how we can shut that shit down so you don't get submitted with a leg lock.